The Doctor. In the TARDIS. Next stop everywhere.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. I'm Charles Skaggs, your co-host this time here in the TARDIS. Once again, ready to talk some classic Doctor Who with someone we've been wanting on the program for quite a while now, and so glad he's finally here. Welcome, everybody, DJ Nik to Next Stop Everywhere.
Hey, Charles, I have to say, you've redecorated. I don't like it.
You don't like it?
But I love being on the show with you today. It's really an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a little different from Titan Talk, so bear with us. But yeah, for those who don't know, Nick was kind enough to appear on our Titan Talk, the Titans podcast wrap-up of Titan Season 1, and we'll talk a little bit more later about what he's going to be doing back on Titan Talk, but I'm going to save that I'll tease that for now. But today, here on Next Stop Everywhere, we're going to talk here at episode 144, we're going to talk The Enemy of the World. And from this is a classic story from the Patrick Troughton era. And way back in 1967 through the beginning of 1968. This was written by David Whittaker, directed by Barry Letts. And this was the fourth serial of Season 5 of the original series of Doctor Who. And, of course, starring Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor, and also Ramon Salamander. So he gets to play two characters, and we'll talk about that, obviously. Frazer Hines as Jamie McCrimmon, and Deborah Watling as Victoria Waterfield. And I cannot wait to talk about this story with you, Nick. Thank you for selecting this one. It's been a while since I watched this.
Oh, well, thank you so much for wanting to discuss this one with me, Charles. This is actually one of my all-time favorite Patrick Troughton episodes. I think it's probably one of the best. Unfortunately, having so many of his serials missing,
right,
as we know, in full, it was great that they were finally able to recover all the episodes from this serial, and I'm so glad that they did, because it's just an incredible one.
Yes, it is, and I was so excited about this, and obviously, the Web of Fear, which also was recovered about the same time. So a lot of us had felt that the Troughton episodes were sorely unrepresented because there were so many stories missing. So it was great to get two Troughton stories at once. When news broke, this was like back in 2013. So it's been about 6 years since we've had these. Before that, though, all we had was episode 3. And that was the only story that that survived the BBC's Purge, which I would love to be able to go back in the TARDIS and time travel to go back to that moment and smack some people around for this horrible decision.
You and me both. It's just I will never understand what happened there, but I guess that's just the way it goes. I mean, also
right,
the Hartnell era, I believe, has suffered from that too. So,
yes, it has. So. But thankfully, they've been doing a lot of recreations through animation lately.
Yeah,
and,
like the Macra Terror, which is actually really good.
I haven't seen that yet, so I can't wait because it hasn't been released in the States here yet. But I can't wait to watch that. I'm dying to that. I've listened to the audio, but I have not watched, of course, the new animation of that. And then we did see The Power of the Daleks recently. With Patrick Troughton's first story, which was a big deal for a lot of us fans because a lot of us had obviously never seen Power of the Daleks, so the animation was great to finally put a visual to the audio on that one. But so before we get started, since this is your first time here at Next Stop Everywhere,
Indeed.
I want to get everybody to kind of get a feel of your Doctor Who background. When did you first start getting into Doctor Who, and kind of give us a little taste, like maybe your favorites doctors or companions, or just kind of a general sense of where your Doctor Who fandom is at.
Well, it's very strange because as a child, and also in Italy, way back when in the 80s, in Italy, there wasn't much about Doctor Who. But being in an international environment, I was lucky to go to an international school. So there were a lot of kids who were either from the UK and such. And actually, a friend of mine from Australia, who was a huge fan of Doctor Who, and he kept going on and on about the Daleks and all this kind of thing, kind of creeping me out with these stories at the time. I had not seen any of this. And it kind of just stayed in the back of my mind. Years and years later, when Netflix brought New Who around, I was actually introduced to Doctor Who with Matt Smith. And that's where the whole thing started. And being a completionist, I finished Matt Smith and said, hold on, this show has such a history. I can't carry on from here. I have to go all the way back to the 60s and watch it from the very beginning. So
just to interrupt, I'm sorry. So you didn't go just straight back to the beginning of the modern series with Christopher Eccleston. You decided, I'm going all the way back to William Hartnell.
Yes, indeed. And my friends thought I was absolutely nuts. But I said to myself, I have to do this because I think to myself, they'll obviously then refer back to things in New Who, and I'll be able to appreciate those references because I've seen, these older serials. So I went all the way back, and it took me, I think, like this 2 to 3 months to do the whole thing. And it was basically, I had to put all the other shows I watched on hold, and it was just Doctor Who throughout. So you just went pure Doctor Who binge and just kind of tabled everything else for the moment until you finished binging the entire series, the classic and the modern. Yes, because I didn't want to in any way pollute the waters with other things, because I wanted to just be full on Doctor Who diet. So So
that is commitment. I totally respect you for that.
Well, thank you. And ever since then I've fallen madly in love with the characters, with the story. And the thing is, being Jewish, I can very much relate to the Doctor Who story. Bearing in mind it was actually written by Sidney Newman, who was Jewish, and also Verity Lambert. But the fact of, the wandering guy who goes around the world but doesn't have a fixed place to live, and his mission is to make the world a better place, which in Judaism is called Tikkun Olam, which is all about making the world a better place. And so I guess also from a spiritual part of me, I could very much relate to the whole concept of what the Doctor did. And, of course, and then you have a clear reference to the Nazis in the Daleks.
Right, exactly. So, there's a great... Do you kind of see the Doctor then as like a parable of the wandering Jew tale?
Indeed, I do. Very much so, yes. I mean, I don't want to be, how can I put it, pretentious, but I also think to myself, granted, okay, it's a police box, but one could look at it as the colors of the flag of Israel, because it's white and blue.
Blue, right.
So that's an overextension of the metaphor. I realize that, but, and that's another reason why I just madly fell in love with the show, not to mention just the beauty of the amazing actors that have been throughout the show, the stories. I've never found a series that has rewatchable value as much as Doctor Who. I actually finished after the last episode with Jodie Whittaker. I said, "It's over. I just want to go back and do it all over again." I know I'm crazy, but that's
no. That's great. That just shows your commitment as a fan. That's one of the reasons I love talking with people about their particular Doctor Who fandom. Is that it's kind of the you are not alone kind of feeling that I get. I can completely identify it, and it seems like you can completely identified with Doctor Who as a series.
Oh yes, and plus I also want to thank you for your suggestions when it came to the Doctor Who figures, because obviously my passion just broadened outside of that, and I started to say, okay, they're these wonderful figures. I'm buying them. I've got to make myself a wall of Who, which I'm actually working on at present. And thanks to your advice on the Master, I'll soon be completing it. So I can't wait to actually to be sort of sharing that with the world.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please post some photos on our Nick Stop Everywhere page. We definitely appreciate that. Obviously, I've got right here my Patrick Troughton figure. I'm holding up to the. Obviously, you in podcast land cannot see this, but Nick can. Hopefully,
it's absolutely gorgeous as usual. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, isn't he he's such a hunk there? So
yes.
And he just fell down. There we go.
He couldn't take the compliment.
Exactly. He just passed out from the excitement. But so that's great, Nick. And I've really I've never as long as I've watched Doctor Who, I've never watched it. I've watched various runs all the way through. Various doctors' runs all the way through, but I've never watched straight from An Unearthly Child all the way to the present. And I know that would be a serious commitment, and my wife would probably divorce me if I ever spent that much time watching Doctor Who back to back to back to back to back to back, and so on. But so
it's an incredible experience.
I'm sure it is. I would personally, I'm all for it. I'm willing to go all in, but I'm also fond of staying married. So
yeah, I can see that.
There's that cosmic give and take that I have to weigh. That balance the scales a little bit. But
Indeed.
All right. So let's get into a little bit of an overview and some background trivia. Now, you mentioned Sidney Newman. I thought it was interesting as I was running up some, just a few trivia tidbits here. This was the last story to be produced under Sidney Newman as the head of drama at the BBC, because apparently his contract expired at the end of 1967, and this drama basically carries over from December all the way through January 1968. So this was the last one with Doctor Who's creator involved, or at least co-creator, and so it's kind of interesting that to leave his mark on, because he was such an important part, as anyone that's watched An Adventure in Space and Time can tell. He obviously has a very key role in the creation of Doctor Who, and it's kind of like almost like a end of an era. Obviously.
Yes, indeed. I mean, you've actually seen kind of the creator sort of leave, which was a bit sad. I guess it's kind of like, seeing Siegel and Schuster on doing a last issue of Superman.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's just, obviously time marches on and nothing is forever, sadly, except for maybe Doctor Who.
Exactly.
And obviously things change, and that's kind of what Doctor Who is all about, really, is about change and how we adapt to it. I also want to bring up when I was talking about episode 3 being the only one that survived. When the rest of this series was found, apparently the last 5 episodes were recovered from a television relay station storage room in Nigeria,
which is really weird. Lord knows how it got there.
Exactly. So obviously this means there could be still more episodes out there. We don't know. Buried in somebody. I know that maybe there might be some private collectors that are holding on to things. I've read reports and rumors, of course, that maybe there's like a collector here and a collector there that aren't willing to come to terms with the BBC about, but obviously nothing official. So you never know if it's just rumors or what. But only the BBC probably knows what's legit at this point. But it's kind of crazy that these episodes can get scrapped. Some of these were scrapped by the BBC in England, and then somehow end up materialized in Nigeria. All these years
It's
later.
very weird. I mean, for all we know, the missing Hartnell and Troughton episodes are somewhere in Greenland,
right.
In some, vault, Lord knows where. I said, but it's really odd.
And why were they separated? They're
exactly.
It's like they're scattered all over the world. It's almost like this big giant Easter egg hunt, and you have to wonder, okay, what were the circumstances that behind this? Like,
Exactly.
like maybe they were put in one box, and one box ended up being shipped somewhere, and then another box ended up being shipped somewhere else. It's just endlessly fascinating to me, and a bit frustrating because
Very
you're
much
like
so.
okay, if we could find one, we should be able to find the rest. They should all be there, right? But no.
Exactly, but and that I think is once again another of the charms that this show has, because there's no other show that is so shrouded in mystery like Doctor Who.
Just like the Doctor himself or herself.
Exactly, as enigmatic as the Doctor.
Exactly. So I guess it's kind of fitting in a way, a little bit. Although frustrating if you're a fan, but
Yeah, and the
Uh,
collector too.
exactly. And also a little bit of trivia I wanted to mention. Patrick Troughton's son David, who appears as an uncredited guard in episodes 5 and 6. If you're one of those eagle-eye spotters, David.
Were you able to spot him?
I was not. I was
I,
not.
I tried to look myself because like, which one of these looks like Patrick,
Right.
But it was
Right. Well, David, if I recall, I mean, he was in the Curse of Peladon, a John
yeah.
Pertwee story. So if you kind of know his face from that story, you should be able to identify him. But maybe it's just because with everything else going on, you don't really think about the guards as much. So unless you're
Mm.
probably really scrutinizing, maybe with a DVD player on your computer, um, you probably wouldn't just spot him right away, I'm guessing.
I don't think so either. Unless like, wait a minute, that looks like a young Patrick Troughton.
Yeah, I've always kind of said like, oh, it would have been great if we had like his son or his grandson playing the Second Doctor in some recreated role, kind of like
Sean Pertwee and
Jo-
John and
and
John Pertwee.
Sean Pertwee, yeah, exactly. So if you've ever seen Sean in his Halloween costume as the Third Doctor, it's scary how much he looks like his father.
It really is, but apparently he has expressed interest in possibly someday doing
Right.
something. So here's hoping.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hopefully Chris Chibnall, showrunner, picks up that ball because obviously Stephen Moffat wasn't interested. But how can you not be? It's right.
Exactly.
It's right there. Just grab it. It's
And he's a brilliant actor in his own right.
exactly. He did a great job on Gotham. He's been on things like The Tudors and other programs. And he's Elementary recently, not too long ago.
Yeah.
And he's a great actor, so why wouldn't you? If he's willing to do it, it's a great opportunity, so seize it, in my opinion.
Exactly. Plus, it would be a treat for us fans. I know I'd be geeking like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
I don't know about you, but
It would be a great Christmas special episode. You don't have to make it part of the regular season if you don't want to, but yeah, just it would be a great treat for the fans, and obviously if probably for Sean Pertwee as well to kind of represent his father in that. All right,
Agreed.
guest cast this week. So we had. I want to run those down really quickly here. So we had Bill Kerr as Giles Kent, who is more than he appears. He's not quite the rebellious, or not quite the noble leader of a resistance against Salamander as we think. We had Mary Peach as Astrid Ferrier. Colin Douglas as Donald Bruce, who Doctor Who fans may remember from the story Horror of Fang Rock, where he played a character named Reuben in that story. That was a Tom Baker classic. One of my favorites from the Tom Baker and Louise Jameson era.
Well, that was brilliant, yeah.
George Pravda played Dennis, Denes. He's appeared in a couple of Doctor Who stories. In addition to this one, he played Professor Yeager in a John Pertwee story called The Mutants, and I primarily know him as Castellan Spandrel in the Tom Baker story The Deadly Assassin, one of my favorite Tom Baker stories.
Oh, well, that's a great one.
That's a great one, and he was also in the James Bond movie Thunderball, so we have another James Bond connection here on Doctor Who. Which I always like to point out. And if you're a Prisoner fan, as I am, from the Prisoner TV show from the 60s, he was in the episode A Change of Mind as well. So just throwing that out there for anybody who's a Prisoner fan like yours truly. All right. David Nadheim played Federin, and he was also in a Prisoner episode called The Schizoid Man. And Milton Johns played Theodore Bennick, the rather sadistic security officer of Salamanders, who's enjoying himself way too much in this story. He played Guy Crayford, in Tom Baker's story The Android Invasion, and he also played another Castellan Kellner, in The Invasion of Time. So we have two Gallifreyan Castellans in this story, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
He's also notable because he played an Imperial officer in The Empire Strikes Back, and he was also in the first X-Files movie, The X-Files Fight the Future, back in 1998, I believe.
Yeah.
So pretty cool to kind of see Doctor Who actors represented in things like Star Wars and The X-Files. Carmen Monroe played Farad Naguib, and one of the few classic black characters in the classic series, which is kind of notable in itself, sadly. Reg July has a great moment, and I think it's episode 3. He plays Griffin, the chef that Victoria gets assigned to, and he's Australian, and he's hilarious in that episode.
I love that guy.
And he's so doom and gloom about it, and pessimistic about everything. It's just hilarious. And actually, one of my quotes in this favorite quotes of the episode. All right. Let's get to our main topics now. And topic number 1, obviously, right off the bat, let's talk about Patrick Troughton, who plays the dual roles, of course, the Second Doctor, but also Ramon Salamander. So what did you think of Patrick Troughton in this story, Nick?
Well, first off, I mean, I'm sure that you know this, and I'm sure a lot of the fans know this. This is not the first time that we have the one doctor playing two roles, as well,
right.
One actor playing two roles, as Hartnell had done the same thing in the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this case, it was done much better. I mean, as much as I love Hartnell, I think the character's more fleshed out compared to the St. Bartholomew's Eve. And Troughton is just incredible in this serial as a whole. He's incredibly energetic. He's funny. He knows when to be serious, and it's just amazing the range that he has.
Exactly,
going from being the Doctor to being Salamander, and I think it was one of the serials that really cemented Troughton as a great part of the Doctor Who mythos.
I think so. I totally agree. I think one of the things that I personally found appealing while I was rewatching this, it shows Patrick Troughton's talent, because if you notice, he has specific mannerisms for his Doctor and something completely different for Salamander. Just the way he carries himself. The Second Doctor loves to fiddle with his hands, and just obviously, the Second Doctor is almost a little bit timid and cowardly at times, while Salamander is just this horrific, monster of a would-be dictator of the world. And just the contrast is so stark between those two characters, and it's such a credit to Troughton when he's able to just kind of switch back and forth between roles as he does.
Oh, yes. And plus, he's able to pull off... Sorry for interrupting.
No, go right ahead.
Plus, how many actors can pull off that kind of matador suit that he's wearing?
Right?
You just needed the kind of Red Bull flag thing going on. I was like, yeah, Troughton could be a matador any day.
Yeah, I'm sure, maybe in some of this, like a struggle with Giles Kent, in the 6th episode, he kind of needs to just go, "Olé!" and then
exactly
allow him to pass through. But yeah, and some Salamander being revealed as like a Mexican character.
Yeah.
It gives that a bit of a global cosmopolitan feel to this story, which I kind of like. Is that it's not just, oh hey, it's another British guy. But we have an actual we have a Mexican villain, a Hispanic villain in this, and even though not played by a Mexican or Hispanic actor, it's still that character being represented in the 60s. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's not just the same old bad guy.
Oh, very much so. And you also mentioned, to open a brief parenthesis here about the actress who plays Faria. I think
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
Carmen Monroe. Yeah,
It was wonderful to for once have, and bearing in mind it was the '60s,
right,
a black actress who was not a token black actress. She was
right.
actually very feisty, had a strong presence, and I thought that was really forward thinking and amazing, bearing in mind, we're talking about the late '60s.
Yes. Yeah, she has this one great line where it's just like she wants to get a hold of Salamander and she wants to watch him die.
Exactly.
And it's just like, wow, hey, like you don't often get to see, that a black character represented on Doctor Who and classic Doctor Who, given that kind of character depth, which was,
Oh,
and
yes.
it's really nice to see in this one. I know that, like, we've obviously been other black characters like Toberman in the Tomb of the Cybermen, but um, he was basically muscle in that story. But Faria here is, she's obviously much more, and she's got her own agenda in this, and she has she tries to do the right thing and be heroic to stop Salamander. Obviously, ultimately pays the price,
Yeah.
but she's portrayed heroically in this and gets cut down, and she doesn't just give up the others when Bennick is looming over her as she's dying, and it's like, look, you've already killed me, so you can only kill me once, and she doesn't give up the goods on everybody else. So I think that's pretty impressive for this is a 1967 story.
Exactly. Very multicultural serial.
Exactly. So it's one of the very interesting things about that. But Troughton in this is just he's so just he obviously carries this entire story. A lot of it is obviously weighed on him. I think a lot of the story was inspired because Patrick Troughton wanted to kind of do something else than play the Doctor, or at least on to kind of change things up a little.
Hmm.
And because he's such a big character actor, and Troughton obviously more than up to the task of this, and it's kind of amazing that just with parting his hair over, putting some like a little makeup on him where he looks like a little darker, a little sinister. He's got kind of shadowy. He's got the smoky eye going,
Oh, yeah.
and and he could just the way he carries himself and his just presence on screen. And I find that so impressive.
And also, I think he was very, very much influential for New Who actors in this serial. You go and see, maybe even David Tennant and especially Matt Smith. I think that among the serials they watched, there must have been this one, because you do see them imitate a lot of things that Troughton does, and I think it's amazing, being in the '60s and only the second Doctor, how connected it could be to New Who.
Right. I know that Matt Smith was heavily influenced by Troughton for his Doctor, and that's kind of why you see Matt's Doctor fiddle with his hands so much.
Yeah.
It's because Troughton did that, and he's just he's always pondering and holding it up, and just it's a much more physical acting on his part, and obviously that kind of just the way he carries himself and a lot of reacts to things is very Troughton-esque, I think.
Oh yes, for sure.
Go ahead.
No, I actually love that. Thinking also that we'd had Hartnell for such a long time, which was so different. He was kind of the more curmudgeonly, grumpy old man. Right. Whereas Troughton is more of the man of action, as it were. Not as much of a man of action as Pertwee will then be.
Right.
But it's a transition.
But he's a little younger, so he's able to kind of do more.
Yeah.
And be more actively involved, as opposed to just kind of standing off while Ian or Stephen or some other male companion does the more physical,
exactly,
active roles. Now, Troughton in this, or at least the Doctor in this story, I should say, he's pretty reluctant to impersonate Salamander. He kind of gets brought in by Giles Kent, kind of recruited almost, and they want him to essentially replace Salamander.
Yeah.
Giles Kent does. But the Doctor's not quite convinced. He needs proof. And Even when everybody's saying, well, hey, Salamander's evil, the doctor still needs evidence of this. He's pretty adamant about it. And then finally, when he is convinced, he takes over the role. And there's a great moment when he's impersonating Salamander and in this kind of interrogation room where he's got Jamie and Zoe. And they don't know that it's the doctor. They think it's Salamander. But the doctor is acting like, he's posing as Salamander for the benefit of what's his name, Donald Bruce, because he's basically trying to get an unbiased reaction from Jamie and Zoe to kind of convince Bruce to take action against Salamander. And so he kind of lets Jamie and Zoe go on. And there's that great moment where Victoria's threatening to hit him. And that whole impersonation of the doctors of Salamander just crumbles. And he just collapses into his doctor persona. Like, oh, please, Victoria, don't hit me. And
amazing how he switches it off and on. He's suddenly
exactly. It's like a light switch. It just blinks. I mean, it's just, and it shows just Troughton's talent at this. I love that scene.
Oh, me too. That's why I think it's just so brilliant. It shows an actor who can really, go from one mood to another in just a split second. It kind of reminds me, to use an example. Recently, I had watched Split, the movie from M. Night Shyamalan.
With James McAvoy, yeah.
Exactly. And it kind of reminded me of that. Granted, they were dealing with multiple personalities, but they have both the same kind of gift of being able to switch just like that into two completely different characters with two completely different personas, even though it's the same person you're watching on screen.
Yeah, Diane Guerrero has done kind of the same thing on Doom Patrol recently that we've been talking about on Titan Talk, because she plays a character, Crazy Jane, who has 64 different personalities.
Exactly.
And it's amazing her range at that as well. So it's obviously takes a very gifted actor to be able to kind of convincingly carry that contrast off, and the ability to just switch it off instantly.
Exactly.
And I'm just always amazed by that. And Salamander. So let's talk a little bit about Salamander. Obviously, has this idea that his whole plan essentially boils down to, look, I'm looking to take over the world, and basically have these captives underground that are able to produce man-made earthquakes and volcano eruptions. And that's what I'm going to use to essentially force the world to kind of bow to my will. What did you think of that plan?
Well,
it's a bit James Bondish almost.
I was just going to say it's amazing how many references there are to James Bond, which we'll see even more so in the Pertwee era. But I guess, here already a few, obviously, James Bond movies had come out. And it is very much a spy story to a certain extent, and all this intrigue of because we're not dealing with an alien menace for once, which is actually very interesting to a certain extent. Because, we're dealing with, a dictator, give or take, who has this whole secret bunker with these people inside. And I thought it was an amazing reveal. It was just... I can only imagine people watching it at the time when it first came out. It's like total gasping moment of, why is he going down that elevator shaft? Who are these people? And all this kind of thing.
Right.
And I thought it was...
It's like this story takes a sudden sharp left turn. Yeah. And you just, it's a completely unexpected. It's kind of a bit of a twist to the story. Which
I think is brilliant. And I think also they bring in the whole concept of maybe the fear of nuclear
annihilation
and nuclear annihilation
and radiation. Yeah, like what if there was an atomic war? It's kind of the kind of a throwback to the 50s.
Yeah,
because obviously just being a decade earlier, that a lot of those fears, and because this is the Cold War still, a lot of those nuclear war fears are present.
And isn't it weird that it takes place in 2018? I thought that was
I know
really weird.
yeah. That's one of the things I noticed. Obviously, it's right there, right in the forefront, right in the first episode, and you're like, well, they really nailed that prediction well, didn't they?
Everybody's driving hovercrafts.
Everybody, they're driving hovercrafts, and they're, it's no longer the United Nations. It's like the United Zones, and like the entire world is not nations anymore. They're all broken up into zones.
Yeah.
And apparently everybody has very 60s like hairstyles and fashions, and
Exactly. And the rocket that can get you from Australia to like Europe in 2 hours. I love that.
Yeah. So I have to think that if you kind of tried to make the story fit into this current timeline, this current, where we are now, this modern era, you'd almost would have to explain this story as like an alternate timeline that somehow was erased.
Yes, I think that's the best way to explain it, as it were.
Because obviously we've had Doctor Who, take place, especially during the Jodie Whittaker era, in 2018. So to reconcile that, you'd almost have to say, well, something because of whatever the Doctor did in the past altered things so that the enemy of the world never really happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, so anything can happen.
Exactly. Because there's no real way to kind of reconcile this
No.
with actual 2018.
Oh, very much so. But, at the end of the day, I guess when you have such a long history, it's very hard to get a clear continuity, So we kind of just have to, like you said, the alternative timeline, I think, is the best explanation at this point.
That's the way I would do it as a writer.
Yeah.
It's like, alternate timeline. Didn't happen. It's been retconned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I embrace that.
It's been retconned by real life.
Exactly. Real life stepped in.
Yeah, or at least what we know is real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows, eh? Maybe we're the alternate timeline.
Yes.
So, anything else about the Doctor and Salamander before we move on?
Well, no, I think that's pretty much all. I think we went over pretty much everything.
All right.
And we have yet to see an episode like this. I'd love more of these ones.
Yeah. This was a tough one for me to kind of come up with a reverse the polarity on.
Exactly.
But I came up with one. But yeah, this is a very unique story, I think.
Oh yes.
We've had like other classic era stories where they've that there's been people hidden in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah.
But like Robot or Planet of the Spiders, I want to think. Or
yes, I think it was Planet of the Spiders. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had kind of similar stories by that, but this kind of like dictator looking to take over the world and the Doctor impersonating him is obviously very unique, I think.
Oh yes, I mean, and such a sort of Bondian kind of story is very rare. I think that's maybe also why it sticks out so much.
Yeah,
because it is so different.
And because this is a 6-episode story, it's it's allowed to breathe, and you have kind of a more of a larger scope. I'd be kind of curious to kind of like do a version of this in the modern day and see how it would carry off, I think.
I'd pay to see that.
Yeah, I would. All right, so let's move on to topic number 2. Let's talk about Jamie and Victoria.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Do you have any thoughts? Well, I was just going to say, Jamie essentially ends up infiltrating Salamander's organization after saving his life, or at least pretending to save his life, and winning his confidence. And then Victoria ends up, as a result, in the kitchen, essentially. And ultimately, they decide, well, hey, why don't we just take episode 4 off? We're not even going to be in that one because we're on vacation, and then in real life, and then we're going to come back, and we'll try and help out later on. So I want to get your thoughts on Jamie and Victoria in this one.
Well, I absolutely. Frazer Hines is one of my all-time favorite companions, and he really. I think obviously. Troughton is the star of the show through and through, but I think Jamie is a close second because I really like what he does. He always is a strong companion throughout the Troughton era, and I think that's why I think he's also such a huge fan favorite because he is so out there and so And once again, he has a great sense of humor, but he can also be very serious when needs be.
Right.
I preferred him, to be honest, to Victoria, who tends to grate on me sometimes. He kind of, as the story.
She's a bit naive, I think.
Yes, so that's why I think sometimes.
And that's why I kind of prefer Zoe.
Exactly.
To Victoria.
Because I think her naivete can sometimes be a little bit irritating.
Yes.
Especially when things are so clear in front of her, she kind of is like, "Oh, really?" It's just, I don't know. But as the serial progresses, I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and I said, "Okay, you did do a good job at the end of the day." I wasn't happy at the beginning, but as the serial progressed, she did good. And I thought it was interesting that her and Jamie recently have had the whole matching tartan thing going on. So I'm like, I wonder.
That's like, yeah, they kind of shop at the same store, I think. The kilts are us.
Yeah, yeah. But no, all in all, the companions, I think, did a good job. But yeah, if I had to choose, as it were, between the two, I think Jamie comes out the stronger between the two.
Yeah, obviously. Jamie's a fighter, and that's one of the things I think is most appealing about him. But he's also turns out to be great comic relief when need be. And Frazer plays so well off of Patrick Troughton. And because, they were together for most of Patrick Troughton's run, that except for one story, his first, Power of the Daleks, they have this bond. And obviously in the later seasons, because they've been around each other, they know how to kind of do that give and take as they deliver lines and banter back and forth. And it's so much fun to watch these two function.
Oh, yes. And I always have this little pipe dream where someday it will be Faria who will actually end up going into the TARDIS. I don't know why. I think she would have been a brilliant companion.
I think she would have too, but unfortunately I think she was a victim of the time period.
Exactly.
It would have been, she's one of those people that, and we've kind of talked about this here, that, the companions that never were. That, just such a great potential there. It would be kind of interesting. And I think she would have been a much more of a stronger character than Victoria.
That's why I think when it comes to just female characters in general throughout the serial, she really outshone Victoria. Maybe because I guess they didn't, when it comes also to the writing, maybe Victoria did not have that much to work with. But
you have to kind of wonder if how much of that was Deborah Watling's fault, or is it just more the script writers? Because of underwriting Victoria, and just kind of viewing her as kind of like someone from an earlier time, so therefore she wouldn't be prone to being as active, and just that just there to scream at monsters and whatnot.
Exactly, and kind of be look pretty and everything else as was the time. When you wouldn't have many stronger female characters, it'd be more to have an attractive female companion throughout.
Right. And I do like the fact that in this story, Jamie's very big protective of Victoria.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And he talks about that he's willing, to fight and kill in this story. So he may be, he's obviously traveled with the Doctor, so he's had some experiences, but that still hasn't really changed the essence of who he is as a man.
Oh, yes, very much so. I'm glad that it then maybe necessarily didn't end up being an actual love story, but the potential was there.
Right.
It were. But I think they did good to kind of dial it back. He's just being protective, but he's not necessarily in love with her. And I think
no. He probably sees her as a sister.
Exactly.
More than anything. Yeah, not a lover. So, or at least love interest.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Anything else about these two before we move on?
No, I think we're good to go with these two.
Right. All right. So topic number 3, and this is where essentially I want to talk about everybody else.
Okay.
I know it kind of groups everything, and I probably should have broken this up a little bit more, but there's probably a little we could say about everybody here.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about Giles Kent. I want to talk about Astrid Ferrier, Donald Bruce, Bennick. And we talked already a little bit about Faria, so probably don't need to talk about her.
Mm.
But and any of the others that you think kind of stand out. Right, maybe Griff a little bit we could talk about. So let's kind of talk first about Giles Kent, because he's essentially he's presented early on as kind of someone the Doctor can find as a potential ally in this, and he's the one kind of explaining what goes on to the Doctor and to Jamie and Victoria, and he's assisted by Astrid, so we could probably talk about Astrid here as well, who's essentially like Giles Kent is essentially her boss in this. So what did you think about these two characters, Giles Kent and the Astrid?
Well, the first thing is it just me, or does Giles Kent look terribly much like Bruce Willis?
He certainly has his hairline in later years.
But aside from saying, "Oh, look, it's Australian Bruce Willis," but other than that,
maybe like closer to Unbreakable.
Exactly that period. But once again, I think we have a very good actor here, because we at first trust Giles. We think he's on the side of the angels.
And why wouldn't you? Because
Exactly.
he's getting hassled by the man. They're breaking up his all his crockery and smashing it. So it's like there's no reason to really doubt him. But we find out that apparently the Doctors doubted him all along.
Exactly. Well, we were probably lulled into this false sense of security of, he's one of the good guys, Doctor. Why are you so doubtful? But I really liked him. The actor did a great job with him.
Bill Kerr. Yeah, he does.
Bill Kerr was awesome. And like I said, and the fact of being able to pull off the fact that at the end he's one of the villains is once again a tribute to him for being such a great actor. Because it's once again it's hard, I think, for certain actors to be able to put their feet in different shoes within the one serial. And obviously at first they needed to use him almost as a to forward the plot, because obviously we don't know what's going on, and so it's also for our benefit too as viewers of what exactly
essentially he's the backstory, the expository character, to kind of explain things to the audience.
But it didn't feel kind of tacked on, or it was like, this guy is just to tell us the story, and that's all he's going to do. And sometimes in other serials or movies, it can be a little bit boring, or when you have somebody like that, depending on how the actor does it. So I really liked him, and I also really liked Astrid. That made me think very much of the whole James Bond thing. Especially Astrid is very much makes me think of an actress from a James Bond movie, because the way she's dressed, the way she carries herself, the fact that she isn't afraid to fire a gun, hop into a helicopter, and all that kind of stuff.
She's flying helicopters. She's grabbing guards' guns
exactly
rather easily, but she's still grabbing. Like there's one guard, they're in Giles Kent's trailer, and it was kind of funny that she just kind of just reaches out, grabs his gun, elbows him out the door, and that's it. She's right there in charge.
Exactly. Well, these guards, we will find out, are terrible shots.
Really? Their ancestors must have been stormtroopers.
Exactly. It's like, seriously, this is your job, and you can't even do it right.
Yeah, maybe that's why Salamander's so frustrated all the time. He has such horrible help.
You just can't get the staff these days.
You just can't get good hired goons these days, I guess.
But so I think that's pretty much my thought on Giles Kent and on Astrid as well.
Yeah. I did love that twist at the end in episode 6. He gets revealed as, oh hey, he's been working with Salamander, from the beginning. He's the guy who helped set up that whole captives in the underground and helped arrange that. And now he's just kind of making a power move to take out Salamander and seize power for himself. I thought that was a great twist.
Oh yes, I mean, and that's also credit to the writers for putting it that way, because nobody would have seen that coming, and it wasn't predictable at all.
No, and so were you thrown by the first time that you watched this story?
Oh yes, I mean the whole famous turn that they make, where suddenly Salamander's going down to that basement and things. I'm like,
Right.
I did not know what in the world was going on. And then when we
Right.
meet people like Colin and such, and it's like it blew my mind. And
Right.
that's why it makes for such an incredible story.
Yeah, Colin is essentially this. Well, on the subject of him, he's this kid who's like he's now a teenager. We find out that he's basically been there since he was a little younger kid,
Yeah.
and he just wants to go out on the surface. He's like, well, look, we've been cooped up here forever and a day. Let's go outside. Maybe there's a little radiation, but we can always come back and get decontaminated, so no big deal, right?
Exactly.
And nobody else seems to be feeling that. They're just all going along with everything, but maybe it's just because that Colin is younger,
Mm.
but and more skeptical of everything.
Yeah, the
But
rebellious.
everybody else is complacent. They're just like, okay, yeah, it kind of sucks down here, but hey, what are you gonna do? No big.
Exactly. Salamander has our interests at heart, and he knows what he's doing.
Right, and they put this trust in him, and nobody seems suspicious at all of
No.
him. Just like, oh, he goes off, he brings us food, and just shows up every once in a while, and as long as he's decontaminated, we're okay with it.
Yeah, and also the
So,
fact of he makes us create these earthquakes and such, and they don't even
right.
question that.
No, there's like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like, okay, so why are we doing like erupting all these volcanoes? What's the purpose of this? If everything's a wasteland, what purpose is the erupting volcanoes going to serve? And he explains it as like, well, hey, we still have enemies out there,
Mm.
but it seems kind of a flimsy excuse, and you think more people would be a little skeptical of it.
Exactly. I guess maybe in the 60s they didn't ask questions. I don't know.
No, yeah, just you do what you're told, right?
There you go.
We do what we're told to do. All right. Let's see. Donald Bruce is a character I find really interesting and mostly amusing because he's so serious in this story. He walks around with his chest puffed out, all upset, and he's just like, well, doctor, I need proof of everything, and he's just he's so uptight.
Yeah.
It's one of those characters that like if you stuck a lump of coal up his butt, in 2 weeks you'd have a diamond. To quote Ferris Bueller, yes. So and we find out his big twist in this story is that, well, hey, he's actually working for a governmental oversight agency.
Yeah.
Ooh, music from the beyond. But yeah, maybe that's the ghost of Donald Bruce.
There you go. Yeah, he heard us.
From the alternate timeline. But yeah, I just find him so interesting in this that because he's so serious about this, and he needs convincing of everything. And then all of a sudden it's like he reveals, well, hey, I've been working for the government all along, so we've been kind of suspicious about Salamander from the beginning.
I think there's an interesting contrast between him and Bennick. As in, I think Bruce is almost the parody of what were the secret services that you had, say, the SS, for example, or these the secret police, pretty much. And I think the writers were trying to almost make a parody of that, of the fact,
or just kind of like play against expectations, because Bruce was this large, intimidating figure in black, and then you had Bennick, who's this kind of scrawny, like,
but super evil Weasley character
with really bad hair.
Yeah.
In the story, and not nearly as intimidating, but he's much more the threat, really.
Yeah, that's why I think Bruce is kind of parody.
It kind of juxtaposes against those two characters. Kind of juxtapose against one another.
Yeah, because like Bennick is the sadistic torturer kind of guy who delights in seeing people suffer, while Bruce is not necessarily maybe buying into it, but he wants to be the kind of pompous security chap, and that's why I think Bruce is almost an exaggerated version of what Bennick is in that sense. While Bennick is the really evil, typical, secret police kind of person, Bruce is the exaggeration of that.
Yeah, or just that that Bruce is essentially what Bennick could have been had he not been so corrupt and evil, inherently evil, I think.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, it's kind of the Laurel and Hardy of the secret police kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good comparison. I think that's fair. So Bennick gets a lot of the great lines in this story. He's essentially a sadist. He really enjoys. This is a guy who really enjoys his work. He gets up in the morning and he goes, "Well, okay, I can maybe torture some people or kill some people for Salamander, and I'll tell him about it, and I'll smile appreciatively as he seems happy with my work."
Oh yes, I mean, I must have had a terrible childhood, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the great lines in this story
Exactly.
that I quoted. He's just this guy was obviously wrong from day one, from right out of the womb, apparently, and just the way he delights in just trying to as he's standing over Furaya's body.
Yeah.
As she's dying, and just this kind of, he's just enjoying this moment and this power over her, and even he isn't able to get the information from her, but she dies, and then suddenly he goes, "Oh, well, hey, here's this file, so I got that going for me, so I guess I'm going to call this a win."
Oh yes, I mean, he's very oily. He's very
no sympathy, no. He's totally irredeemable character.
Yeah, and here, brilliant. The actor did a great job on this one, because if you feel revolted by the character, it means he did his job.
Right. I mean, the guy went on to play an Imperial officer in Empire, so yeah. He's very good at playing bad guys. Or people you really, really don't like.
Exactly, and it's credit to him for doing that, for selling that to us. They're like, I really don't like this guy.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny that once he's confronted with somebody pulls a gun on him, he immediately because he's a bully, he gets exposed as a coward. He's like, oh, don't shoot me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when he's in control.
Mr. Tough Guy, and then once you pull a gun on him, then he folds like a house of cards.
Yeah. So I think another great pairing there between both Bruce and Bennick. They play their roles to perfection, and I think it's almost nice that in the end Bruce turns out to not be as bad as we think, and it's all
right.
and he actually ends up helping the Doctor to a certain degree. So
yeah. I mean, he's maybe not your ideal guy, but he's at least better than everybody else.
Yeah,
and willing to kind of get things in order once again, kind of help with the cleanup.
He redeems himself to a certain degree.
Right, exactly. All right. Anything else about this story before we move on?
Well, I think
anything you wanted to talk about?
I think we looked at the fact that obviously there were a lot of James Bond references. It was very much an action story, and it might have even given fuel for the writers as the show progressed to then do things like what they did with Pertwee, I think, because this is maybe an idea, a mold for what we want to do moving on, or we can put it there, we can shelve it for the moment and then bring it back because of the fact that it works as a story. And it's wonderful to see that even a story of intrigue, of almost kind of spy story, works in Doctor Who, and it shows the versatility of the show, I think.
Yeah, because Barry Letts, who directed this story, obviously goes on to be one of the showrunners of the John Pertwee era. So yeah, maybe he was just kind of like, hey, this is the kind of story I want to tell.
And he tells it to perfection.
And you could very easily, I agree, see that you could totally see this as a John Pertwee era story.
Oh yes, and in fact, no surprise, John Pertwee is one of my favorite Doctors for that reason, because I love that whole kind of man of action kind of thing in the Doctor. So there you go.
Yeah, and Salamander, obviously, that's got a very James Bond villain kind of name.
Oh, exactly. That's why it's so Bondy and it's crazy. And I actually wonder, is Salamander actually dead, or could we ever see him someday? I wonder.
Well, I think he's turned up in some fiction or something, non-canon, but but he has returned.
It would be nice to see him return on the show.
But yeah, he's out there in the time vortex. You think he could return at any moment, and so I think it's if you get somebody that could kind of pull that off. Obviously, Patrick Troughton's a tough act to follow, but
Oh, yes.
if you can get somebody in the ballpark, you could probably bring Salamander back if you wanted to.
I would actually really love to see that someday, even though I know it might be very tough, seeing, like you said, the way Troughton depicted him. But it would be nice.
He's such a unique actor. It's be very hard to kind of reproduce that.
Oh, very much so. As it is, I think, with all these with all the actors who played the Doctor, it's like, who can redo that?
Because I think they had Reece Shearsmith play Patrick Troughton in Adventure in Space and Time. And he wasn't even close, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
I thought that was rather weak casting.
But I think so too. But once it goes to show you how unique that actor was and how great his performance was, and also I love the comedy in this as well. I mean, we were talking about the chef.
Yeah. We didn't really talk about Griff, but yeah, there's this great moment, just where they're all in the kitchen, and Griff, the chef, is, he's kind of like not sure what to do with Victoria. She's there, she's brought in there to help him, but he doesn't really want her help. He doesn't want her there at all, and so he's like, okay, he comes up with this idea. Okay, why don't you sit down and write down the menu.
Yeah.
And so she's like, okay, that sounds great to me. And she starts writing and, whatever, ready there to write down what he says. And he just rattles off this like, well, hey, first course is disrupted by earthquakes. Second course is disrupted by whatever. And, he just goes off on this kind of rant. And so she's probably going like, why am I even here? Why am I dealing with this guy?
Exactly.
It's such a fun scene to watch.
I mean, his pessimism is almost comical. It kind of reminds me of
great comic relief.
Yeah, it reminds me of to use another comparison to the character of Puddleglum in the Chronicles of Narnia, who I don't know if you are familiar with him.
Yeah.
But that kind of negativity.
That's a really right, exactly. That's a good comparison. I didn't think about that.
So yeah, because I mean, especially the BBC version of the Chronicles of Narnia, played by Tom Baker. Puddleglum played him, and it's exactly the same kind of pessimism, and that's why it made me smile even more. So, because I guess I went back to my childhood, and like, Puddleglum is now a chef. I love that.
That's funny. So it was the guy Reg Lai. He was a very funny character in this story. Really liked him, and I'd actually would have liked to have seen more of him, but I get why they didn't focus on him. But he could have been in at least another episode, as far as I'm concerned.
I think so too. But then again, they put the right amount of him in the story.
Yeah, because it is supposed to be a serious story, so it's not like you didn't want to play it for laughs and you didn't want to overdo it, but it did kind of break up a little bit of tension, I think.
And I think the fact that we would like to see more of him is a good thing. It goes to show that we really enjoyed it. Because if it started to become tiresome, it's like, oh no, here comes another wisecrack.
Yeah, that's the problem with sometimes with comic relief characters, you either really like them or you really find them annoying. Yeah, and you just can't wait for them to get off screen. So it's very tricky, and it's up to I think a lot of the actors to really kind of pull off and make them likable.
Yes,
even when they're not being very likable characters.
Yeah, when the comic relief doesn't overstay its welcome, it means it's well done.
Yeah, it's very tricky balance.
Agreed.
All right. Anything else about this episode?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up, and the fact that it then ends with a cliffhanger because it goes directly into what would then be the Web of Fear, I believe.
Right. Yes, it is. And so, we find out that it ends with Salamander essentially, the doors of the TARDIS open, and he's sucked out into the time vortex, while Jamie, Doctor, and Victoria are holding on for dear life. Yeah. And that's the great cliffhanger for this story. which carries us in the Web of Fear. Obviously, they shut the doors and then proceed the adventure. And poor Salamander, well, not really poor, but, Salamander's kind of flinging around in the vortex. Who knows when or where we'll see him again.
Exactly. But yeah, a brilliant serial all around. Very much, I enjoyed it from start to finish. Did you?
Yes, I did. I really liked this story a lot. And just a lot of great characters in this one. All right. So let's move on. Best lines of the episode. There's obviously a lot of very quotable lines. Did you happen to write down any that stuck out to you?
Well, I was talking about the connection to New Who. At the very beginning of the serial, the Doctor says human beings partake of their favorite pastime, destroying each other, which I thought was very much made me think of New Who, because that's very much something that even David Tennant would say, or what Matt Smith would say. That's almost kind of more
that commentary on humanity.
Exactly, or even Peter Capaldi. I could see him pulling that kind of phrase off.
Right.
And that was actually, I think, one that really, really stuck out to me. And of course, we have what would then become a recurring phrase, which is "run." That one is.
Yeah, it never gets old, does it?
Exactly. You will always get that. And I think, did we actually have that before this? I think we might have, but I don't know, because it seems like Troughton kind of was a trailblazer for so many things.
I think he was, and I think you're right. I think the run thing, I don't want to say cliche, but just that repeated catchphrase.
Yeah.
Is I think that's something that started with Troughton's run.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
But no, I mean,
I think it was because that Troughton's Doctor was always like at his best when he's like, okay, everybody, let's run. He's always telling Jamie and Zoe, like, please, they're coming after him. And meanwhile, like, Hartnell's Doctor would kind of stand there and want to argue with whatever he's facing, but Troughton's Doctor was more inclined to just run away from the threat.
Yeah.
And because he's one, to save his companions because he's concerned about them, but probably also to save himself.
Exactly. And then the other one I liked was the moment when Astrid has been shot and she keeps asking Patrick Troughton, so you're a doctor of medicine, you're a doctor of law, and she's like, you want to remain mysterious, which I think is something else which is wonderful, that it is a theme that carries on throughout the show as the years go by, the fact that he wants to remain mysterious. Obviously in the Smith period we had the whole thing about his name. And and that, and I love that fact that you have that little moment between Astrid and Patrick where he doesn't want to tell her what doctor he is, without saying Doctor Who, but they did it in a different kind of way this time.
Yeah, I liked the Doctor to Giles Kent where he makes this rather poignant comment. I thought this is after the Salamander's goons had come in and smashed up his crockery.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's kind of looking at it, going, "Oh dear, what pretty crockery this is. Sad, really, isn't it? People spend all their time making nice things, and other people come along and break them."
I love that.
Yeah, so that was great. And I liked Salamander to Jamie, where he was saying, this is after Jamie's been exposed as not actually saving Salamander's life. He goes, pretending to save my life was ingenious, huh? But ingenuity requires a constant stream of new ideas. Yours seem to have dried up.
That was a great one, too. Loved it.
Yeah, I like that. And Jamie to Bennick, where Jamie says, "You must have been a nasty little boy." And Bennick goes, "Oh, I was. But I had a very enjoyable childhood."
That was very clever.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
Oh, yes.
And then, of course, the bit earlier with Griff, the chef, and Victoria, where Griff goes, "Now the soup's boiling. Did I put any salt in it? Dinner tonight's going to be national disaster. My mother was right." And Victoria goes, "What?" Griff goes, "She wanted me to be a dustman. Here, look, do you want to do something useful?" And Victoria's, "Oh, yes, please." And Griff goes, "Well, sit down and write out the menus. First course, interrupted by a bomb explosion. Second course, affected by earthquakes. Third course, ruined by interference in the kitchen. I'm going out for a walk. It'll probably rain.
Yeah, classic. Loved it.
That was epic.
Brilliant.
Hilarious stuff. All right, so do you have a rating for this story?
I would give it, I think 8.5 TARDIS consoles out of 10.
Oh, that's fair. That's good. I give this one 8.5. I'm actually pretty in sync with you on this one. 8.5 poisoned meals. Because that's when Federin gets kind of Victoria's out there, kind of bringing a food cart to him, and somebody kind of poisons his meal a little bit, and doesn't do too well.
No.
Yeah, so. But actually, I take that back. He was intending to be killed, but the guy, I forget his name, refused to do it.
I think that was Federer, wasn't it? I think wasn't it him, Federin?
Oh, was it Federer? I'm sorry.
I think it was Federin who refused to poison.
Oh, you know what? It was Dennis.
Dennis, pardon me. Yeah, Federin.
Yeah, Dennis was. Yeah, he was the one that was eating.
Yeah.
And then, Federin was the one who was supposed to kill him, but didn't. And then Salamander turned around and killed him instead for failing to do so. That's it. All right. Everybody got that? I know there's a lot of characters in this one. So
yeah.
You need a scorecard. All right. I do have a reverse the polarity segment.
I'm curious.
This one, like I said, was kind of tricky.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of focused this time to kind of come up with a modern era story to kind of represent if you enjoyed this one. So I decided to go ahead to 2007 for Human Nature / The Family of Blood. The 8th and 9th episodes from Series 3 in 2007, written by Paul Cornell. And the reason I went with this is obviously because David Tennant gets to play 2 roles in this one. He gets to play the Doctor, of course, and he gets to play John Smith.
Yeah. That's an amazing one.
So if you kind of wanted to, my reasoning here is that if you want to see the Doctor playing, something completely different in a Doctor Who episode. So it's kind of like Troughton, only in Troughton's case he was playing a villain, but John Smith obviously is not a villain in this story.
That's actually a very clever one. I actually had an idea. It might be a bit of a stretch, but one that came to mind might have been also Nightmare in Silver.
That's another one. Yeah, because that's a good one because the 11th Doctor was Matt Smith gets to play the 11th Doctor, and he also gets to play Mr. Clever.
So I thought it would be
That's good.
For that reason, because the fact you've got the kind of 2 sides of the coin.
Right, and he was playing kind of a villain in that one, so that one probably makes more sense than my selection. But so let's go with Nick's selection on that one.
I preferred your selection, but there you go.
But so obviously, the 10th Doctor, he's this is the whole business where if you remember that story, he has like a fob watch, and he's able to kind of essentially alter himself into a human because he's on the run from the family of blood, and hides out in 1913 Earth. He takes the role of this teacher at Farmingham School for Boys, with Martha acting as his maid. Poor Martha.
Oh, yeah.
And who gets really treated horribly in that story. But ultimately, the family blood come looking for him, and then John has to be convinced to kind of take the role of the Doctor once again, after falling in love with a teacher there. And he has to assume the role of the Doctor once again to stop the family of blood. So it's a pretty good story, and it's a great acting performance by David Tennant, playing someone completely different from the 10th Doctor.
It's a great story all around, and then what it then leads to is even more amazing.
Yes. Yeah, so that because that gets followed up, of course, by the 3-parter.
Yeah.
With Utopia and the Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, where we get the return of the Master.
Exactly. So whenever the Master is present, I'm always extremely happy. So that's I particularly love the prelude to that
right.
3-parter.
Exactly, and obviously, this story, this is the introduction of the fob watch, which gets used in Utopia.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was very cool. All right. I don't have any listener feedback this time. I'm kind of disappointed. Holly from Wisconsin, she's probably off on summer vacation doing other things, but sadly did not. Of course, we've been having some trouble getting our episodes posted. Because our normal person posting episodes, Karen, is, for those who don't know, she's been kind of going through some medical issues, and she's on this new medication, and she's not doing well with it. So we're kind of having to scramble and find somebody else to help us post our episodes. They're all done. We just need to get a past couple posted and get it caught up. So hopefully they'll be up soon. So fingers crossed.
Well, we definitely wish Karen all the best then.
Yes, we do. Yeah, for those who don't know, she has MS, and which is a horrible condition. So Karen's doing as great as she can, but unfortunately, this new medication, she's having problems with it, adjusting to it. So obviously, our thoughts are always with Karen. And if you've been wondering where episodes are, I mean, obviously, hopefully, we're caught up by now when you listen to this. That's what's been going on. So I just thought I'd mention that real quick. So that's probably why we haven't heard from Holly. Hopefully that's why we haven't heard from Holly. But other than that, if you want to be like Holly normally is, and we definitely appreciate that, please drop us a line, nextstopeverywheresmg@gmail.com. That's nextstopeverywheresmg for Southgate Media Group @gmail.com. Or you can reach us on the Twitter at nextstopsmg. On Twitter, or on Facebook, of course, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, or the Instagram that all the kids are on these days, at Next Stop Everywhere podcast on Instagram. And Nick, since you were so kind enough to join us here and had a great discussion, why don't you tell us where you are on the interwebs?
Well, first off, may I say it was an honor and a pleasure to join you today, Charles. And I usually, what I deal with, sadly has not much to do with Doctor Who. But for anybody who is fans of country music, you can find me on the Whiskey and Cigarettes Show. And that's whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. And on the website, you can find the links to all our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So yes, for all those who enjoy both traditional and modern country music, be sure to check out the Whiskey and Cigarettes Show.
Please do. Nick is awesome. He's fantastic, and we always have fun talking to him, Jesse and I, and I hope everybody enjoyed Nick as well. So please support him in his endeavors.
Well, I had a pleasure.
Officially, you get the official Charles recommendation.
Oh wow! Well, Charles, I really...
for all the good that is.
Well, hey, it's to me that's golden. I'm taking that to the bank, I tell you.
All right.
But thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
You might get like maybe a couple of lira or something for that. But.
Yeah, seeing the way the country is going, we're probably going to end up out of the euro. So I reckon I might have.
Oh, that's right. You're in a euro, yes.
Yeah, you never know. Seeing the way things are going with the salamanders around the world at the moment,
right.
So anything can happen.
That's true. This story is kind of timely in a sense. Isn't it?
Yes, it is. Sadly, but yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for the chat, Charles. It was a pleasure. And whenever I get the chance to talk about our favorite Gallifreyan, it is always a joy for me.
Oh, thank you, Nick. I definitely appreciate that. As for me, of course, you can reach me on the Twitter and Instagram at Charles Skaggs, or on Facebook at Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio. Please like and follow me there. I definitely appreciate that. Or my blog, Geeky Things, if I can get this to work. Damn good coffee and hot. Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on Next Stop Everywhere. All kinds of Doctor Who, Torchwood, Sarah Jane Adventures. Hopefully news of Series 12 coming up soon. Like the Jadoon that are supposed to be returning to Doctor Who. So stay tuned for that. All kinds of comic book sci-fi news. Obviously whatever interests I have, and I have many. News of my other podcasts, of course, too. Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, which Nick is thankfully going to be rejoining us on here, hopefully, next weekend, as we talk the Season 1 wrap-up of Doom Patrol on DC Universe. Hopefully you've been enjoying that one, Nick.
Oh, it's I'm not going to give away too much, since we'll be able to dissect that
Nicely teased. Nicely teased.
What I can say is there is a lot to talk about.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. All right. I'm looking forward to that. We'll just leave that there for now. But yeah, please, everybody, check us out on Titan Talk, especially when Nick joins us for our Doom Patrol wrap-up. And also, you could right now, you could go back and listen to our Titans wrap-up, Season 1 wrap-up that Nick joined us on. That would be great. Otherwise, keep in mind that you could also check me out on Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast they do with Stan Sprouse, wife of comic book artist Chris Sprouse, where we talk about all things Twin Peaks, David Lynch, etc., etc. And we're going to be discussing the new release, Criterion Collection release of Blue Velvet. So if you're a fan of that film, we'll be discussing that and running down that new release and going through all the special features and whatnot. So good excuse to go back through Blue Velvet, one of my favorite films from the 80s. And otherwise, Jesse and I are getting ready to relaunch the Phantom Zone podcast, where he and I are going to be talking Krypton Season 2 here shortly. So if you're a fan of Sci-Fi's Krypton series, based off course on the Superman mythos, please check that out when we get, we'll get more details once we start releasing episodes, but kind of keep a lookout for that one as we get ready to talk about that. Otherwise, next time on Next Stop Everywhere, I'm going to be joined by special returning guest companion, Joe Corellia is going to be returning to Next Stop Everywhere. Joe had recently, not too long ago, discussed The Invisible Enemy from the Tom Baker era. But this time she's going to talk a modern era story as we discuss Let's Kill Hitler from the Matt Smith era. And that's a fun one to talk about, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're going to have a blast with that one. I think the listeners are going to enjoy your talk over that one.
Yeah, maybe not so much the Hitler part, but everything else we'll talk. But obviously it's a big River Song episode, so that should be a lot of fun to talk about. Joe wanted to talk a bit River Song, and that's a big one, obviously.
Oh, yes.
For her. So please stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about that in Next Stop Everywhere 145. Otherwise, thanks everybody, and thanks again to Nick, DJ Nik. Thank you so much for joining us here on Titan Talk, or excuse me, on Next Stop Everywhere. So many podcasts. Got to keep them straight. So Next Stop Everywhere. I hope you had fun. I had a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it immensely, and once again, thank you for setting this up, Charles, and for having me on board.
Oh, you're welcome back anytime, and if you're ever in the mood to talk some more Doctor Who, just let me know, and we'll get you on the schedule once again. So everybody, go check out his Whiskey and Cigarettes show. Highly recommended. And come on back next time. Next Stop Everywhere, Let's Kill Hitler. It's going to be good with Joe Corellia right here on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye, everybody.